Hey, what's up guys, Matt Josh here. So basically here's the deal. I lost a bet to my friend Tom about a TV show. So now I've got to read the Communist Manifesto. I'm reading the Penguins Classics version. This was given to me by my good friend King Louis Gaming for my birthday. So yeah, I'll just get right into it, shall we? No time to waste. The Manifesto of the Communist Party. A spectre is haunting Europe. The spectre of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this spectre. Pope and Caesar, Metternich and Gusot. Oh, by the way, apologies if I can't pronounce some of these words. I'm a filthy British peasant, uncultured swine, so I may not be able to pronounce them all. French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decreed as communistic by its opponents in power? Where the opposition that has not hurled back to the brand Yo, I want to die. I want to make that very clear. As communistic by its opponents in power. Where the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries. Big boy words. Two things result from this fact. 1. Communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. 2. It is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the spectre of communism with a manifesto of the party itself. To the end, communists of various nationalities have assembled in London and sketched the following manifesto, to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, and Danish languages. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The bourgeois and proletarians. The history of all hetero, forgive me if I mispronounce that word, existing society is the history of class struggles, free man and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guild master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstruction of society at large, or in the common ruin of the contending classes. In the earlier epochs, of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold graduation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we have patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guildmasters, journeymen, apprentices, and serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate graduations. The modern bourgeois society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonisms. It has but established a new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in a place of the old ones. Our epoch, the epoch of the bourgeois, possesses, however, this distinctive feature. It has simplified the class antagonisms. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeois and the proletariats. From the serfs of the Middle Ages sprang the charioted bourgeois of the earliest towns. From these bourgeoisie, the first elements of the bourgeois were developed. The discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, opened up fresh ground for the rising bourgeois. The East Indian and Chinese markets, the colonization of America, trade with the colonies, the increase of the means of exchange and commodities generally gave to commerce, to navigation, to industry, an impulse never before known, and thereby to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. The feudal system of industry, under which industrial production was monopolised by closed guilds, now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturing system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Division of labour between the two different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labour, and in each single workshop. Meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising. Even manufacture no longer sufficed. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionised industrial production. The place of manufacture was taken by the giant modern industry, the place of the industrial middle class. By industrial millionaires, the leaders of whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. Modern industry has established the world market, for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. The development has, in its turn, reacted to the extension of industry, and in production as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended in the same proportion the bourgeois developed, increasing its capital and pushed into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. We see, therefore, how modern bourgeois is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. Each step in the development of the bourgeois was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class. An oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany, their taxable third estate of the monarchy, as in France, afterward, in the period of manufacture proper, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility. And in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeois has at last, since the establishment of modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative, state exclusive, political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeois. I've also just come to realise that I'm sitting alone in a room reading aloud the Communist Manifesto. I want to die. The bourgeois, historically, has played a most revolutionary part. The bourgeois, whether it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, practitioner, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavily ecstasies of religious fervour, I don't know how to pronounce that, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine, Centralasium, big boy words that big boy can't pronounce, in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indecipherable charted freedoms, has set up that single unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeois have stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honoured and looked up to with reverent and awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science, into paid wage labourers. The bourgeois has torn apart the family, its semi-terminal veil. Sorry, the word's in two. I don't know how that works. And has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. The bourgeois have disclosed how it came to pass the brutal display of vigour in the Middle Ages, which reactionists so much admire, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence. It has been the first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade of all former exoduses of nations and crusades. The bourgeoisies cannot exist, without constantly revolutionising the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Conversion of the old modes of production in unrelated form was, on the contrary, first condition of existence for all early industrial classes. Constant revolutionising of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and aggravation distinguish the bourgeois approach from all earlier ones. All fixed, fast frozen relations with their train of ancient and vulnerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new formed ones become acquainted before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, and man is the last compelled face with sober senses his real conditions of life, and his conditions and relations with his kind. The need of a constantly expanding market for its products chases the bourgeoises, the burgermen over the whole surface of the globe. It must nest everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. The Burger Boys has through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. To the great charging of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feet of industry the national ground of which it stood. All old established national industries have been destroyed or are easily being destroyed. They are dislodged by new industries, whose introduction become a life and death question for all civilized nations, by industries that no longer work up indigenous raw material, but raw material drawn from the remotest zones, industries whose products are consumed not only at home, but in every corner and quarter of the globe. In place of the old ones, satisfied by the productions of the country, we find new ones, requiring from their satisfaction the products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local national seclusion and self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations, also Louis's mum. And as in material, so also in intellectual production. The intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible, and from the numerous national and local literatures there arise a world of literature. The bourgeois, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, by the immensely facilitated means of communication, draws all, even the most barbarian nations, into civilization. The cheap prices of its commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls, with which it forces the barbarians' intensely obstinate hatred of foreigners to capitulate. It compels all nations, on pain of extinction, to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst, i.e. to become burger people themselves. In one word, it creates a world after its own image. The Sheldon's Big Bang Bazinga Bing Bong people have subjected the country to the rule of the towns. It has created enormous cities, has greatly increased the urban population as compared with the rural, and has thus rescued a considerable part of the population from the idiocy of rural life, just as it has made the country dependent on the towns. So it has made barbarian and semi-barbarian countries dependent on the civilized ones. Nations of peasants on nations of burger people, the east of the west. By the way, if I say something like the burger men or the burger people, I mean the bourgeoisies. I'm just going to fill everyone that wasn't, in on the joke. The Big Bang people keeps more and more doing away with the scattered state of the population, of the means of production and of property. It has agglomerated population, centralized means of production, and has concentrated property in a few hands. The necessary consequence of this war, political centralization. Independent or but loosely connected provinces with separate interests, laws, governments, and systems of taxation become lumped together into one nation. With one government, one code of laws, one national class interest, one frontier, and one customs tariff. Louis's mum, during its rule of scarce 100 years, has created more massive and more colossal productive forces than all preceding generations together. Subjection of nature's forces to man, monarchy, application of chemistry to industry and agriculture, steam navigation, railways, electric telegraphs, clearing of a whole contents from cultivation, canalization of rivers whose populations conjured out of the ground. What earlier centuries had even a pre-assessment that such productive forces slumbered in the lap of social labour, we see then the means of production and of exchange on whom's foundation the Big Bang people built itself up, were generated in feudal society. At a certain stage in the development of those means of production and of exchange, the conditions under which feudal society produced and exchanged, the feudal organisation of agriculture and manufacturing industry, in one word, the feudal relations of property become no longer compatible with the already developed productive forces. They become so many fetters. They had to be bust asunder. They were bust asunder. Into their places stepped free competition, accompanied by a social and political constitution, adapted to it and by the economical and political sway of the beans class. A similar movement is going on before our own eyes. Modern Louis Stevens society, with its relations of production, of exchange, and of property even. A society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of the netherworld, whom he has called up by his spells. Real talk, I thought we were going to be talking about money, not fucking Merlin the Wizard. For many a decade past, the history of industry and commerce is but the history of the revolt of modern productive forces against modern conditions of production, against the property relations that are of its rule. It is enough to mention the commercial crisis that, by their periodical return, put on its trial, each time more threateningly, the existence of the entire Bing people society. In these crises, a great part not only of the existing products, but also of the previously created productive forces are periodically destroyed. In these crises, there breaks out an epidemic that, in all earlier epochs, would have seemed an absurdity. The epidemic of overproduction. Society suddenly finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as a famine A universal war of devastation had cut off the supply of every means of subsistence. Industry and commerce seemed to be destroyed. And why? Because there is too much civilization, too much means of subsistence, too much industry, too much commerce. The productive forces at the disposal of society no longer tend to further this development of the conditions of being people, property. On the contrary, they have become too powerful for these conditions by which they are fettered, and soon, as they overcome these fetters, they bring disorder into the whole of Sheldon's society, endanger the existence of me, property. The conditions of the bourgeois, of the bendy bread people, are too narrow to compromise the wealth created by them. And how do the people get over the crisis? You know, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to go back to calling them bourgeoises. Bourgeois. Bourgeoises. Alright, that's their new name. Bourgeoises get over these crises. On the one hand, by enforced destruction of a mass of productive forces. On the other, the Hebrew. Don't leave that in. And more destructive crises, and by diminishing the means whereby crises are prevented. The weapons with which the bourgeoises felled feudalism to the ground are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself. But not only has the bourgeoisie forged the weapons that bring death to itself, it has also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons, the modern working class, the proletarians, the hero of the story. In proportion as the bourgeoisie, i.e. capital, is developed in the same proportion of the proletariat, the modern working class developed a class of labourers who live only so long as they find work, and who find work only so long as their labour increases. Capital. These labourers, who must sell themselves piecemeal, are a commodity, like every other article of commerce, and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition, to all the fluctuations of the market. Owing to the extensive use of machinery and to division of labour, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character, and, consequently, all charm of the workman. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily acquired knack that is required of him. Hence, the cost of production of a workman is restricted almost entirely to the means of subsistence that he requires for his maintenance, and for the propagation of his race. But the price of a commodity, and therefore also of labour, is equal to the cost of production. In proportion, therefore, as the repulsiveness of the work increases, the pay wage decreases. Nay more, in proportion as the use of machinery and division of labour increases, in the same proportion the burden of toil also increases. Whether by prolongation of the working hours, by increase of the work exacted in a given time, or by increased speeds of the machinery, etc. Modern industry has converted the little workshop of the practical master into the great factory of the industrial capitalist. Masses of labourers crowded into the factory are organised like soldiers. As privates of the industrial army, they are placed under the command of a perfect hierarchy of officers and sergeants even. Not only are they slaves of the bourgeois class and the bourgeois state, they are daily and hourly enslaved by the machine, by the overlooker, and, above all, by the individual bourgeois manufacturer himself. The more openly this despotism proclaims gain to be its end and aim, the more petty, the more hateful, and the more embittering it is. The less the skill and exertion of strength employed in manual labour, in other words, the more modern industry becomes developed, the more is the labour of men succeeded by that of women. I've been doing this for 24 minutes. What is my life? Differences of age and sex have no longer any distinctive social validity by the working class. All the instruments of labour, more or less expensive to use according to the age and sex. No sooner is the exploitation of the labourer by the manufacturer so far at an end, that he receives his wages in cash. Then he is set upon by the other proportions of the bourgeoises, the landlord, the shopkeeper, the pawnbroker, the guy that slips me pawn mags underneath the desk when no one's looking, etc. The lower strata of the middle class, the small tradespeople, shopkeepers and retired tradesmen, generally the handicraftsmen and peasants. All these sink gradually into the proletariat, partly because their dismissive capital does not suffice for the scale of which modern industry is carried on, and it's swamped in the competition with large capitalists, partly because their specialised skill is rendered worthless by new methods of production. Thus, the proletariat is recruited from all classes of the population. Also, my boy MatPat just started live streaming. MatPat, the chances of you seeing this are very low, but if you do see this, I hope the pregnancy is going along well. The proletariat goes through various stages of development. With its birth begins its struggle with the bourgeoises. At first, the contest is carried on by individual labourers, then by the work of people of a factory, then by the operatives of one trade, in one locality, against individual bourgeoises who directly exploits them. They direct their attacks not against the bourgeoises' conditions of production, but against the instruments of production themselves. They destroy imported wares that compete with their labour. They smash to pieces machinery that set factories ablaze. They seek to restore by forces the vanished status of the workmen of the Middle Ages. At this stage, one second, let me turn this music up a bit. Your boy's listening to the Persona soundtrack, so what? Love me a bit, Persona. At this stage, the labourers still form an incoherent mass, scattered over the whole country, and broken up by their mutual competition. If anywhere, they unite to form more compact bodies. This is not yet the consequence of their own active union, but of the union of the bourgeoises, which class, in order to attain its own political ends, is compelled to set the whole proletariat in motion, and is moreover yet, for a time, able to do so. At this stage, therefore, the proletarians do not fight their enemies, but the enemies of their enemies, the remnants of absolute monarchy, the landowners, the non-industrial bourgeoises, the petty bourgeois. Thus, the whole historical movement is concentrated in the hands of the bourgeoises. Every victory so obtained is a victory for the bourgeois. But with the development of industry, the proletariat not only increases in number, it becomes concentrated in greater masses. Its strength grows, and it feels that strength more. The various interests and conditions of life within the ranks of the proletariats are more and more equalised in proportion as monarchy obliterates all distinctions of labour, and nearly everywhere reduces wages to the same low level. The growing competition among the bourgeoises and the resulting commercial crises makes their wages of the workers even more fluctuating. The unceasing improvement of machinery, ever more rapidly developing, makes their livelihood more and more precarious. The collisions between individual workmen and individual bourgeoises take more and more the character of collisions between two classes. Thereupon, the workers begin to form combinations, trade unions, against the bourgeoises. They club together in order to keep up the rate of wages. They found permanent associations in order to make provision beforehand for these occasional revolts. Here and there the contest breaks out into riots. Now and then the workers are victorious, but only for a time. The real fruit of their battle lies not in immediate result, but in the ever-expanding union of the workers. This union is helped on by the improved means of communication that are created by modern industry, and the place that workers of different localities in contact with one another. It was just this contact that was needed to centralize the numerous local struggles, all of the same character, into one national struggle between classes. But every class struggle in a political struggle, and that union to attain which the burghers of the Middle Ages, with their miserable highways, required centuries. The modern proletarians, thanks to railways, achieve in a few years. This organisation of the proletarians into a class and consequently into a political party is continuously being upset again by the competition between the workers themselves. But it ever rises up again, stronger, firmer, mightier. It compels legislative recognition of particular interests of the workers by taking advantage of the division among the bourgeoisie themselves. Thus the 10 Hours Bill in England was carried. Altogether, collisions between the classes of the old society further in many ways the course of development of the proletariat. The bourgeoisie find itself involved in the constant battle, at first with the aristocracy, later on with those portions of the bourgeoisie itself, whose interests have become antagonistic to the progress of industry. At all times of the bourgeoisie of foreign countries, in all these battles it sees itself compelled to appeal to the proletariat, to ask for its help, and thus to drag it into the political arena. The bourgeoisie itself therefore supplies the proletariat with its own elements of political and general education. In other words, it furnishes the proletariat with weapons for fighting the bourgeoisie. Further, as we have already seen, the entire sections of the ruling classes are by the advance of industry participated into the proletariat, or at least threatened into the conditions of existence. These are also the proletariat that are these also supply the proletariat with fresh elements of enlightenment and progress. Finally, in times, again, with the class struggle near the decisive hour, the process of dissolution going on within the ruling class, in fact within the whole range of old society, assumes such a violent, glaring character that a small section of the ruling class cuts itself adrift and joins the revolutionary class, the class that holds the future in its hands. Just as, therefore, at an earlier period a section of the nobility went over to the bourgeoisie, so now a portion of the bourgeoisie goes over the proletariats, and in particular a portion of the bourgeois ideologists, who have raised themselves to the level of comprehending theoretically the historical movement as a whole. Of all of the classes that stand face to face with the bourgeoisie today, the proletariat alone is a really revolutionary class. The other classes decay and finally disappear in the face of modern industry. The proletariat is its special and essential product. The lower middle class, the small manufacturer, the shopkeeper, the artisan, the peasant, all these fight against the bourgeoisie to save from extinction their existence as fractions of the middle class. They are therefore not revolutionary, but conservative. Nay more, they are reactionary, for they try not to roll back the wheel of the Tory. If by chance they are revolutionary, they are also only in point of their impending transfer into proletarianism. They thus defend not their present, but their future interests. I've just seen the time that I've been doing this for 34 minutes. I crave death. In the conditions of the proletariat, those of odd society at large are already virtually swamped. The proletarian is without property. His relation, I don't know why I couldn't read that word, to his wife and children have no longer anything in common with the bourgeoisie's family relations. Modern industrial labour, modern subjection to the capital, the same in England as in France, in America as in Germany, has stripped him of every trace of national character. Law, morality, religion are to him so many bourgeois prejudices, behind which lurk an ambush just as many bourgeois interests. All the preceding classes that got the upper hand sought to fortify their already acquired status by subjecting society at large to their conditions of appropriation. The proletarians cannot become masters of the productive forces of society, except by abolishing their own previous mode of appropriation, and thereby also every other previous mode of appropriation. They have nothing of their own. They have nothing of their own to secure and to fortify. The mission is to destroy all previous securities for insurances of individual property. All previous historical movements were movements of minorities, or in the interest of minorities. The proletarian movement is the self-conscious, independent movement of the immense majority, in the interest of the immense majority. Sorry, wait. Yep, no, I didn't read that twice, that was what it said. The proletariat, the lowest stratum of our present society, cannot raise itself up without the whole subordinate strata of official society being sprung into the air. Though not in substance, yet in form, the struggle of the proletariat with the bourgeoisie is at first a national struggle. The proletariat of each country must, of course, first of all settle matters with its own bourgeoisie. In depicting the most general phases of development of the proletariat, we trace the more or less veiled civil war ranging within existing society up to the point where that war breaks out into the open revolution, and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie lay, the foundation for the sway of the proletariat. Hitherto, every form of society has been based, as if we had already seen, on antagonism of oppressing and oppressing classes and oppressed classes. But in order to operate a class, the modern labourer, on the contrary, instead of rising with the progress of industry, sinks deeper and deeper below the conditions of existence of his own class. He becomes a papier, and papierism develops more rapidly than population and wealth, and here it becomes more evident that the bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to be the ruling class in society, and to impose its conditions of existence upon society is an overriding law. It is unfit to rule because it's incompetent to assure an existence to a slave within his slavery, because it cannot help letting him sink into such a state that he has to feed him instead of being fed by him. Society can no longer live under this bourgeoisie. In other words, its existence is no longer compatible with society. The essential condition for the existence and for the sway of the bourgeoisie class is the formation and augmentation of capital. The condition for capital is wage labour. Wage labour rests exclusively on competition between the labourers. The advance of industry, whose involuntarily promoter is the bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the labourers due to competition by their revolutionary combination due to association. The development of modern industry therefore cuts from under its feet the very foundation on which the bourgeoisie procedures and the proprietariat's products. What the bourgeoisie therefore products above all is its own gravediggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. Well, that makes for chapter 1 of the Communist Manifesto, Penguin Classics. How long have I been doing? I've been doing this for 38 minutes. Jeez, if you've watched from the very beginning, why would you do that? I don't have funny commentary. I'm reading a book. Do you not want to buy the Communist Manifesto? It says on the back, literally right here, £1. You could buy this easy. But hey, if you did watch all the way through, I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. I'd say share this with your friends, but I'd rather you not be bullied for knowing who I am. Yeah. So, hope you enjoyed chapter 1 of the Communist Manifesto. I'm going to be doing it for the next 2 to 3 days, because I don't know how long it is. I'm nearly halfway through it now, actually. Yeah, I'm virtually halfway through. So we might get through it in the next episode of this. I don't know. Yeah. Be gone, thought.